Okay. Welcome back to another episode of I'm a Software Engineer. What next? Thanks for joining me.
It's been ages, absolutely ages since we spoke, James.
You've used that line before. For those playing at home, we record 2 episodes in a row and do it every other week. What t-shirt have you got for us this week?
So I've gone a bit out of brand from video games to internet memes. And so I'm quite a big fan of a guy called Ozzy Man Reviews. And if you know Ozzy Man Reviews, you'll know that he was quite fond of a particular meme where a speedboat driver went too fast and caused mayhem in the boat. And that was one of my Christmas presents from my wonderful children this Christmas. So they know me well.
I do recognize that video, actually. It's definitely a classic. I think most people have probably seen it.
I don't think I have laughed quite so much as I did when I first saw that. And it's quite a toxic response for a human to laugh so much at other people's misery. And I do remember laughing and then coming round from the laughter and thinking, you're a terrible human to be laughing at this. Anyway, but it's gone on to be one of the all-time.
We'll have to put a link into that video, or maybe the Aussie Man reviews of that video. But I seem to remember the driver was like hell-bent on just going for it. And then you could see everyone else that was just suffering in the background.
Yeah, it's awful. It's really awful. And it's really not something that you should be laughing at, but I couldn't help myself. I'm sorry. Anyway, it's not what we're here to talk about though, James. It's just purely for my edification.
We're off topic there. That's not good for the listeners. What I did want to talk about this week, controversial topic, is if AI takes an engineer's job, what should they do? So I'm going to ask you that question. I'm asking that question. What do you think?
It's a great question. So I have thoughts on this, obviously, as a software engineer, and there's a lot of talk, a lot of column inches in being written about this. And I think, can you just pull up the B Sky? What are they called?
Yes,
B Sky tweets. They're not called tweets. I don't know what they're called. Blue Sky
tweets. Yeah, I don't even know if you can call them tweets anymore on Twitter. Is it X?
No,
or
I don't know. I don't refer to it as X or Twitter anymore. I refer to it as Zitter. Mainly because I have so little time for the people involved. But anyway, so this quote, Simon Wilson's a pretty good writer, commentator on a lot of stuff, but he said, programming as a career right now because of LLMs would be like quitting carpentry as a career, thanks to the invention of the table saw, which I think is bang on. And then, a few people that just scroll back a bit, ever so slightly, scroll back. Yeah. No. Keep going. Go back to me, but yeah, just leave Hoodie Guthrie. Hoodie Guthrie, first of all, is a great handle, right? Hoodie Guthrie, well done, well played. And because there's a lot of hate. There's a lot of hate around LLM assisted coding, and I just don't get it. I get that LLM assisted coding and LLMs in general are massively overhyped, but as Bill Gates said many years ago, humanity's fantastic at massively overestimating short-term returns and massively underestimating long-term returns. And so we're in that moment right now where people are overestimating the short-term benefits of these things and they're completely missing the long-term benefits of what these things will do. Now, don't get me wrong. Are there costs associated with it? Are there risks? Of course. We can talk about those as we need to. But the bottom line is that anyone who, as a software engineer, is not scanning the domain of the tools that are available now and putting them to use to make them into a better programmer is exactly like that previous quote there about running away screaming and quitting carpentry when the table saw turned up. And I like what Hoodie Guthrie said. If you it must be an amazing developer or a terrible LLM user, right? I've been coding for 30 years and I can build things orders of magnitude faster now than I could before. And that is exactly my experience. I've spent the last 6 months writing something and I've done the work even 2 years ago that would have been the work of 2 or 3 engineers and a designer on my own. Now, we still need software engineers? Yes, right? And so I said, I agree. Are they perfect? No, neither am I. Far from it. And are they useful? Yeah, I'm better. Am I better with one in my toolkit? Absolutely. Are they overhyped, as we said? Yes, of course they are. And sadly, so is everything new in tech. I just don't get the hate, lean in, learn how to use them, get better, lather, rinse, repeat. Right? That's how I feel about it. And so to answer your question, to bring this back to your question, James, if AI takes our jobs, then what? I kind of disagree with the premise. I'm not sure I agree that software engineering will go away. Will there be fewer humans with their keys on keyboards writing source code? Yes. But are those people going to become farmers or social media influencers or some other job that in the modern world? I don't know. I think what happens is that we get more stuff to do. You just use different tools to get it done. And so I'm not expecting software engineering to disappear at all. I mean, we spoke last time about your foray into programming. The more people that can program, the better, right? So I think this actually opens up a bunch of opportunity. Everything in the future that I see is computational X, right? And what I mean by that is that instead of being a thing, there'll be a programmable version of that thing, and you'll need to orchestrate how to use it, and you'll get help from LLMs in order to execute that. So that's what I see.
That's good, because that means my job as a software engineering recruiter is hopefully still safe for now. One thing that I see from a recruitment perspective of software engineers is that there seems to be more emphasis on finding engineers that have got multiple skills, so not just skills in one area. I think personally, and you can challenge me on this, but I think it's probably going to be important that engineers understand more than just one area, because I guess if you're just an expert in one area, it's probably easy to automate that one thing or that one area, as opposed to someone who knows how the back end and the front end connect, and the cloud or the LLMs, and how it all works together might be, or should be in theory, in more demand. What do you think about that?
I think this is. So I accept your premise. In this case, I'd reject the first one, but I accept the second one, that certain kinds of jobs that are automatable are probably going to be automated by machines, right? I mean, I think that's clear. Like we spoke with Michael Smith from Sagittal, and he introduced me at the time to the Cynefin framework, which I hadn't heard of before. And I must admit, I've used it everywhere since. It's really, really a fantastic bit of thinking. What I've found particularly useful with this thing was that it's a very good way to describe the kinds of things that are going to be LLM'd away versus the kinds of things that I think humans need to sort of still be involved in the process to execute. And so the right-hand side of this diagram, the clear and complicated parts of the framework, if something's really clear and at like recipe level, then that's perfect for being automated. And it's very easy for an LLM to do those kinds of things, okay? If it's complicated, and the distinction here between complex and complicated is worth making. Complicated means lots of parts, but no individual part necessarily is particularly difficult to understand or intellectually challenging, so lots of moving parts.
Yep.
Those kind of problems, again, are very amenable to being LLM'd away, all right? And then the left-hand side of this diagram, this is complex problems, requires deep reflection and a lot of like cognitive load, or even more unstructured, chaotic problems, right? Those ones are less amenable to LLMs. What I think ends up happening is things that are automatable in a software process, they are just going to disappear as tasks, and they're going to be done as part of the CI/CD process or whatever, right? But the thinking, the complex and chaotic parts of the process, so the chaotic being maybe involving interacting with people, or the complex, requiring super deep reflection or intellectually challenging ideas, those things still end up being the preserve of humans. So, do software engineers go away because LLMs take their jobs? No. But do the jobs change? 100%, right? And so, as the tools change, the jobs change, like we saw from Simon there before about the table saw changing the job. At the moment, I agree with Simon Wilson's comment. You'd be insane to run away screaming from the building because LLMs are turning up. It would be just like running away from carpentry because the table saw emerged. All right. And so, I guess that poses some other questions, which we can talk about. But definitely, I do not see software engineering disappearing as a discipline simply because large language models are coming along and taking away some of these complicated and maybe clear tasks out of the mix.
So if you're earlier on in your career, you could be a graduate or just starting, the first couple of years of being a software engineer. That's probably the hardest point now in which to find a job. Now, they wouldn't have that much exposure, I assume, to complex type problems, even chaotic, because they may not have been necessarily involved in those parts of the development. They may have just been doing little, ticket type fixes and things like that. What should they be doing now to ensure that they're going to be in demand in future? Should they be focusing on learning just how to use these tools, or what would you do in that situation now, knowing what you know?
So the question about what to do, right? Great question. One of my themes, and I think I've mentioned a few times on the podcast here, is this idea of the shift from imperative to declarative interactions with machines. And again, just for those playing at home, what do I mean by that? Imperative is the how you do something, and declarative is the what. And for any suitably or for any meaningful problem that you might need to solve, you have to know why. Why am I doing this? You have to know what things need to get done in order to achieve the outcome, and then you have to know how to go about doing the things that you need to do. So if I want to put a painting up in the wall to make my lounge room look nicer, the why, right? Okay, well, a painting would look good on the wall there, and then I need to know how, right? Well, I need a hammer and a nail and a frame and so on. Okay. And so in this shift, this like LLM-enabled generative AI shift, we're moving from imperative, where you need to know how, to this declarative world where actually the machine works out how to do stuff, but you still need to know why and what. Right. So there's a shift in thinking from imperative to declarative thinking. And so if I was giving some advice to a software engineer, what's interesting now is maybe rather than being, and I'm just going to put a little asterisk next to what I'm about to say, because I don't necessarily think I believe it 100%, but let's just go with it for the sake of the thought experiment. You're going to be thinking less about how to do some things and a lot more about what needs to be done. Now, the trick is that in order to know what to do, you have to have some wisdom, okay? And the way you get the wisdom is by having worked out how to do some of these things at some point in your career, okay? So I don't know if I've got an answer, like an actionable answer to the question, right? Because what I just said is essentially the same thing as get 30 years of experience, then you know what to do, then it becomes very easy to tell the machines what to do, and then they can work out how to do it. But that is completely and utterly unactionable advice for anyone starting out in their career. And just to be clear, the reason I say this is because you can get an LLM to generate vast amounts of absolute rubbish very, very easily. Okay. And anyone who has any skills as an IC in any domain will know good from bad. And they'll be able to see what good looks like versus what's rubbish. And unfortunately, no LLM I know of yet, or thus far, has that wisdom of a human with many years of experience in a domain that can have taste, right? To kind of steal a quote from Steve Jobs, it's really the taste. It's really your taste that becomes the interesting currency. And selling someone to get better taste I don't think that's actionable advice.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe if let me turn the question, or to pivot the question a little bit. What am I doing? I have spent the last 6 months working with these things on a daily basis, learning how to use the tool. And I haven't been worried about losing my job or being redundant. But what I've been very anxious about and very active on is working out how do I get the best out of these new tools. There's this sort of old adage about if the tools change, the job changes. Okay, and I think that's true here. And so it doesn't mean the job disappears. It just means that you're doing a different version of that job. And I'm very much doing a different version of the job I was doing 5 years ago with all this tech. I'm now much more comfortable taking on rather large pieces of work, knowing that the heavy lifting, like the coding, the actual coding time, right, the writing the code time, has become much less of a chunk of the total amount of work you have to do. So being able to write a good spec, it's kind of funny how we've turned we've gone full circle on this, right? This old idea from years ago when I started out, a waterfall, you do the design, someone gets the requirements, and then someone looks at the requirements and writes a design, and then someone looks at the design and they spec out how things are to be built. And then we threw that all out the window, fair enough, because it didn't really work. And then did sort of move to iterative, cyclical type operating model. As it turns out, when you come back to working with something like Claude Code, I find myself very much in this. I'm going to rubber duck the requirements with Claude, get it in plan mode and just list them out and get it to iterate on the requirements for me. Then I go, okay, now let's talk about a design. And again, I go into this rubber duck mode with Claude where I'm articulating the design with it. And then I go, okay, let's have a crack at implementing it. And it's funny how what I find it sort of weirdly, we're back where we started. We're sort of, I'm now in this mode when I'm writing software. I sit down and I write, okay, what are the requirements? Okay, given those requirements, what does a good design look like? And then given that design, what did implementation look like? And I find that to me is kind of funny that we've gone full circle on that.
That's interesting. I think one thing I've noticed with a lot of companies that are hiring is that they are looking for. A lot of people won't have experience, like certainly deep experience with AIs or LLMs. It's becoming more common now because they've been around for a few years, but they do like people who have used a lot of these tools. So I can only say, like, go and use them, build side projects. Like now, you can go and build an application that might actually help you with a task that you're doing, or you could build your own CRM or your own product that you might use, even if it's just to practice it, to see how all that stuff works. But companies love that sort of initiative, and I think that if you can demonstrate that you like using these tools and you're really passionate about them, you're going to find yourself having more opportunities. Like that is for sure a very strong sign of a lot of the companies I work with, is what they're doing, side projects, or their interest and their passion for the subject in general. That's going to separate a lot of engineers. So like the engineer that wanted to be in there because they get a good salary, but they don't really care for software engineering, versus the engineers that are actually really excited by these tools because now they can do more and they can build more. And you can't fake passion. Like if you're passionate about software engineering, you're probably going to be all right. Whereas if you're not, maybe you're not in the right place, or maybe you need to figure out what it is you're passionate about within software engineering, or can get passionate about, so you don't become obsolete.
So I think one of the things to remember is these tools, they remove toil, not talent, right? They remove the need for toil, not the need for talent. Okay, and I think it's worth remembering that. And like I said before, like these things, these human characteristics like taste and judgment and empathy and stuff, they don't go away. We still need that. And so what I think is kind of super interesting is that the bit where you think about what needs to be done, that's still there. But the bit where you are limited by your ability to type code, that is now substantially reduced in the workflow. So in many ways, you should be thinking, wow, this is a massive productivity boost for me, because I can actually spend way more time. Of the total time I need to spend to solve any particular problem, arguably, is less. And then the breakdown of that into thinking and doing and redoing, right, is actually very different to what it is today. You might spend 20% of your time thinking and 80% of your time writing code. That's one extreme. I don't think that's necessarily the right breakdown, but that might be an extreme. Now, you might be spending 50 or 60% of the time that you used to in total relative to what you used to get the same output. But of that 60%, 80% of it is thinking and 20% of it is coding. Like, it's flipped completely. So not only is the total time reduced, you can do more in the same time. The breakup of those things has been radically readjusted.
Yeah.
I think one of my favorite quotes of all time is between conception and creation lies the shadow, from T.S. Eliot, The Hollow Man. Fantastic poem, bit dark, but that line always stood out for me, because as someone who does creative work, you have an idea, and the idea is just the start of something, right? Then the distance between the idea, conception, and the creation of something is huge. And what I find really interesting about this is the shadow, as it were, between conception and creation. You can shine a light into that creative process with tools like this, and that shadow is vastly smaller than it otherwise may have been. And I find that really, this is super cool, right? To be able to get the opportunity. I'm doing stuff these days where I know my output on a weekly basis is 20, 50% higher, and not just in software, but just across everything. I'm doing 20, 50% higher than what it was 2 years ago, because I've got access to these tools that are just really accelerating my ability to make stuff.
Do you think that being more of a generalist is an advantage because you have a picture of sort of everything, how it connects together, and therefore, you can utilize those tools to go and do those things that you're not deep in, but it can help you with?
Yep.
Or like there's an argument for, I guess, being very specialist, so you're well ahead of what the AI is capable of, or the things that AI can't do. And what you're saying there, to me, makes me think in my mind that being more generalist is actually better, because you can use these tools to go and do the little things in each area, as opposed to being really niche in one area.
I'm going to give you a paradox, right? So I collect these phrases that I call confluent ideas. I've been collecting them. I haven't got many, but I've got a few of them I've collected over the years. And one of them, which I got from my business partner, Dan, is this idea of a deep generalist. And it's like an oxymoron, right? This idea of someone who is deep, but they're also a generalist. Yeah. And so they're almost like conflicting ideas, okay? And I think if you're just a generalist, I think you're at risk, if I can push back a little bit on what you said, I think you're at risk of the LLM just having the surface level stuff and being able to kind of parrot it back at you. So I think there's a risk there in just being a generalist. What I would prefer is...
like the complicated argument on what we were talking about before with the Cynefin.
Yeah,
got you.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so, what's a deep generalist? Well, it's someone who can actually do a bit of both, right? Has the capacity to understand something at whatever the surface level might be, but then can go deep on it as needed and pull out the interesting stuff, the insights or the wisdom or the taste, right? That might not just be there on the surface alone. I mean, you see it
Okay.
yourself with anyone who's ever gotten GPT to write something about a topic they know about, right? In depth, you can see that it's pretty superficial for the most part.
Mm.
Deep research is interesting. Deep research I've been using a little bit. I've got it to write some background material for me for stuff that I've been doing. And it takes hours sometimes. Like I got it to write a bunch of backing material for a thesis that I'm working on. And it was like 10 separate chapters on it. It took 2 or 3 hours per chapter, and it came back with 20,000 words maybe on each topic. And I look at that and I go, okay, wow, this, because it was on a top subject that I knew about and know deeply, and it was like, okay, this is actually pretty good. But if you just get it to do stuff straight out of GPT and you get it to do it on a topic you know about, you can see that it's pretty shallow.
Yeah. Yeah, I've noticed that actually when you ask it things that you know, but it's so convincing when you don't know anything about it. You're like, well,
That's the problem.
interesting.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah. So I would go out and say that anyone who's worried, embrace any tool that you can to help, any AI tool that you can get your hands on to use and try and become familiar with and see how it can help you in your own role is going to be a good thing.
I think you have to, as a software engineer, the one thing to take away from this is you have to look at this as disruptive change in the landscape of tools that you can use, right? So I talk to people about their personal software process. I talk to like junior engineers and senior engineers getting better. In order to be independently productive, what I need you to be is to be independently productive. I need you to have a personal software process which looks at 3 things: your foundations of computer science. Right, so you need to sort of understand how things work, things like order complexity, or what iteration is, or functional composition. All of these sort of computer science topics. You've got to have some idea what that stuff's going on, what's going on there. The second thing you need is you need to have the technology stacks and the tools, the tech du jour, and the tools that you use to get stuff done. And importantly, you need to know how to use them in a way that doesn't hurt you or anyone around you. Right, so a plumber or a carpenter, to continue that metaphor, carpenter that turns up and is wielding a chainsaw to put up some shelves, that's dangerous for him and him or her and everyone else, and that's not a good idea, right?
Yep.
And then the last one is you need to know how to not be a dickhead. Okay, so you've got to be able to work with other people and be able to. No problem of any meaning can be done by an individual these days with software. You always need some other people to help you get stuff done. And so those 3 things, they fit into the personal software process. Now, if you want to think about what are LLMs doing here, LLMs are a change to one of those dimensions, not all 3. They really don't help you with people, and they really don't help you with the foundations of computer science if you don't know what they are. If you don't understand what good looks like in terms of solving problems with software, then an LLM's not going to help you. It's going to make it worse. But they've radically changed the tool landscape.
Yep. That's a good point.
And so my advice... Yeah, sorry, my just to wrap that up, my advice to software engineers is okay, I understand these 3 pillars, and now I really deeply get what's going on in the tool landscape, and I've changed my tool belt in response to that.
Yep, I see that, and I do see more companies are emphasizing more on the communication side of candidates. How well they present themselves, how they can articulate, and that's not something that you can necessarily change overnight. No. But gone in the day where desperate for a software engineer, we'll take whatever we can get, even if they're a really difficult person. I think that certainly the companies I work with anyway, they need people who are really good at communicating. I think that's a massively underrated skill of a software engineer, or perhaps has been, probably not now. It's probably becoming very obvious.
Yeah, I think this is a bigger point, right? But it's a very good one, which is you have to be able to tell a good story.
Yeah,
and I would hope that you tell stories based on facts, unlike some folks in the world that we live in at the moment tell stories based on lies. But but in order to cut through in any situation, you have to be able to tell a good story.
Yeah,
and this change to the tools is making that even more true.
Yep. I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more. And there's definitely a lot more to be said on that topic. I don't think we'll go deep into that now. Maybe we need to do, what would be useful, like an episode on talking about communication skills, because if you are having trouble like it's probably one of the harder things to give feedback on for hiring managers is to knock someone back because they can't communicate. But it's probably what some people need to hear. And how do you go and improve that? So I think we should jump onto that one.
I have I won't say his name now because we need to talk to him and get permission, but I have a very, very good person that we should bring on to talk to about that. He's absolutely fantastic and completely changed the way that I present information to other people.
Okay, I think that would be amazing.
Particularly up the food chain. Yeah, he's fantastic. I mentioned it to him and he was keen to do it, and we just need to tee it up. But he's great. Yeah, really, really great.
In saying that, like, and I don't want to go into this episode now, but there's definitely ways you can improve. But just being aware of it for a start is probably one good thing. Being aware of how you present yourself and not, when you get asked a question, don't go down a rabbit hole. Here's what I would say is step one for a lot of software engineers. Answer the question and you'll be ahead of most out there. Appreciate that. I don't want to take up everyone's time any longer. We appreciate anyone that's got this far. So thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe. Matt, you can comment on that if you want. You've given up. Thank you for your input again, and I really appreciate it. We'll see you all again next week.
Thanks, James.